Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, almost good morning on the West Coast. I'm Deshaun Weber. I'm the Director of Worker-Owned Enterprises at Catalyst Miami down in South Florida. And I sit on the Federation's Policy and Advocacy Exec Committee. Tonight, we're going to be talking about folks who are advancing legislative and policy initiatives across the country. So it's going to be an exciting just opportunity here from folks from all over the country. And so please, if you don't mind, share in the chat your name, your organization, and your location. Again, that is name, organization, and location in the chat. We have an incredible agenda here tonight, and so I'm really grateful to be in this space with all of you.
Thank you so much, Deshaun, and welcome everyone. As I said, my name is Mo Mankling. I'm the policy director here at the Federation, and I am really, really excited about our agenda today. I have had the privilege of working with our policy and worker ownership state advocacy fellows and for the last 6 months, and everyone has been working really hard on projects and coming together to talk about advocacy and how the Federation can more deeply engage with worker owners. And so tonight you will hear from our fellows. You'll hear a little bit about what's going on in terms of advocacy across the country and at the federal level. And we encourage you, if you have any questions, please feel free to note them in the chat. And definitely get involved. Once I'm done talking, I'll share a few links for how you can stay connected to the work of the Federation on advocacy issues, or you can reach out to me anytime. You can email policy@usworker.coop. I'll add that email in the chat as well. So with that, just a few little reminders. If you are a member of the Federation, you are welcome to join the Federation's Policy and Advocacy Council. We meet monthly to talk about, to share ideas, share updates on what is going on in terms of government relations at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. So this is a very exciting moment in the world of worker co-ops. There are several pieces of legislation that you'll hear about shortly that are going on, and initiatives in a handful of states. I think right now I'm tracking over 50 different initiatives that are happening in different capacities, in different places, just in the US alone. That's not even including the really exciting work that's happening internationally. So I'm excited to share a little bit of that with you today. If you're not a member, I would encourage you to become a member. And you can go to usworker.coop/join to learn more about that. I also want to give a shout out because we have a member meeting coming up on May 24th. So if you are a member, definitely make sure you're signed up for that. I think that is it. Those are just a couple of housekeeping things. I'll share a little bit more about our advocacy activities at the Federation, but right now I'm going to hand it over to Aaliyah Ned. Aaliyah is the Government Relations Manager over at the National Cooperative Business Association, and I'm trying to find Aaliyah in the video. Okay, great. And
yes, thank you so much, Mo. And good afternoon, everyone. Y gracias a todos por la oportunidad que presentar hoy sobre nuestro trabajo de advocacia aquí en NCBA CLUSA y sus apoyos en esos esfuerzos. My name is Aaliyah Ned, as Mo mentioned, and I am the Government Relations Manager at the National Cooperative Business Association, NCBA CLUSA, working to promote and advocate for cooperative businesses across sectors, including worker co-ops, but for all cooperatives. So the new 118th Congress has begun, and they have slim majorities held by Democrats in the Senate and Republicans in the House, meaning there are some sticky dynamics happening. So these slim majorities, along with some major must-pass pieces of legislation in the year ahead, which includes a bill to address the quickly approaching debt limit, currently anticipated around June or July, and the Farm Bill, which governs most of USDA's programs, including the only program for cooperative development, which is the Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program, means that any proposed legislation that will move through this Congress must be overwhelmingly bipartisan. At NCBA CLUSA, in terms of our work to promote and defend cooperative enterprise, we know that the cooperative business model and co-ops in general has support among both Democrats and Republicans. And as Mo mentioned, we've increasingly seen bipartisan efforts at the state and federal level to support employee ownership. So one of our main strategies in achieving the level of bipartisanship needed this Congress to move legislation forward and ultimately get it passed, particularly in the House, will be our Congressional Cooperative Business Caucus. This caucus is a group of members of Congress who have identified themselves as key cooperative champions. It is currently chaired by Congressman Mark Pocan, a Democrat from Wisconsin, and Congressman Jim Baird, a Republican from Indiana. And we are currently at 19 members and always looking to grow and leverage the caucus to really move the needle and look at them as a continued resource. So if you all are meeting with your members of Congress, please encourage them or your representatives on both sides of the aisle to join so we can continue to push the needle ahead. Looking at some of the specific bills that we are going to be really focused on in the year ahead, we're looking at reintroducing some key pieces of legislation that would address a huge issue for the co-op community that we all have been advocating for a long time, which is access to capital and increasing the pool of capital for co-ops. So in the short term here, this means the Employee Equity Investment Act, or EEIA, which we're looking to get reintroduced this month. And this bill particularly would create some new funding streams to support and promote employee ownership. Down the line, in the next few months here, we are working with Congressman Negus's office and Senator Hickenlooper from Colorado to reintroduce the Capital for Cooperatives Act, and both the House and Senate Small Business Committees to reintroduce the Main Street 2.0 Act. These bills would remove that very cumbersome SBA personal guarantee requirement that effectively bars co-ops from accessing SBA 7A loan programs and establishing new co-ops or funding transition to worker co-ops to address the silver tide of retiring baby boomers who would close their small businesses otherwise. But really, it would build on the momentum from the 2018 Main Street Employee Ownership Act, which I know many of you in this space were key champions in advocating and mobilizing towards getting that across the finish line. And aside from these pieces of legislation, our efforts will also be focused on championing co-ops and supporting our partners like the Federation in implementation of recent legislation, including the Inflation Reduction Act, which has major investments in environmental justice and community-based climate mitigation programs that co-ops are eligible for. The fiscal year 2022 Appropriations Act, which included the Worker Ownership Readiness and Knowledge Act that would establish the Employee Ownership Initiative within the Department of Labor, as well as the CHIPS and Science Act. And just before I wrap, in terms of that implementation, we are seeing it hit the ground. So I want to highlight a request for information from the Economic Development Administration, which closes in 2 weeks on March 16th. and they are seeking comments on the Regional Tech and Innovation Hubs program that I know you all heavily advocated for passage of, that includes provision to promote employee ownership and the establishment of new worker co-ops specifically. So just wanted to put that on your radar, but thank you all for your work as advocates, and we greatly appreciate our continued partnership with the Federation and its members. And please don't hesitate to reach out if we at NCBA can be helpful. But I'll turn it back to you, Mo.
I do want to thank Aaliyah from NCBA CLUSA so much for all of her work and the work of NCBA. In total, we absolutely would not be able to do all that we do on the advocacy front without the partnership with NCBA. So, you know, just know that, like, especially for members, like all of your a lot of membership dollars go towards myself and partnerships with NCBA that are able to like really move a lot of this advocacy work forward. It is really exciting. On the last note that Aaliyah mentioned, for the Regional Innovation Hub bill, that is going to be something that we are going to reach out to folks about. I will share a link in the chat if you want to read a little bit more about the Chips and Science Act and all the different pieces that actually mention worker co-ops within them. That was a piece that we worked on with Representative Jamal Bowman's office, and is the second piece of legislation at the federal level featuring worker co-ops since 2018. So very exciting. I'm going to share just a little bit from the Federation front on what we've been working on, and then we'll get into the fellowship presentations. As I said before, we have our Policy and Advocacy Council that meets monthly, and we just switched to meeting on the second Thursdays of the month. And so I encourage people to join that space. That is really where we've been doing a lot of the kind of you know, like peer sharing and like asking really deep questions and analyzing how we want to be operating within kind of like the advocacy and government relations space. So I enjoy and encourage people to join that. So I dropped a link to the Policy and Advocacy email newsletter. One thing that we have started to do this year is actually sending out updates specifically on policy and advocacy, just because there is so much going on. So that is going to be unveiled soon, and I'm excited about it. So you can sign up in the link in the chat. This year, we're also working on a position paper. So folks will be invited to participate in roundtables around different issues. So some of them might have to do with like climate justice. We already had one on home care cooperatives. We'll do others around like finance and labor issues. So basically what we're trying to do is to understand what is it that our membership really wants to be advocating for over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, and then allow us to operate from a place of proactivity. So we have been very reactive to asks that we've gotten, especially from Congress, and we want to move to a place where we really solidly know where our members want us to be working, and go from there. So the position paper is going to be a work on that. Every year we also do participate in the Drive for Co-ops vote, which is basically just encouraging people to register and vote in the elections. The government elections, usually the federal elections or the ones that are happening at your state and local level. So, you know, as cooperators, we know that democracy is an everyday thing. And so we want to kind of like keep that co-op spirit and encourage people within the movement and outside of it to be voting. Aaliyah mentioned earlier today the idea, you know, if you're meeting with your reps, I know some members often reach out to their to the representatives to come and visit. But if you haven't ever considered that, I would really encourage you to look up who your state representatives are, who your representatives in Congress are, and invite them to your co-op. It's the absolute best way to garner more support for worker cooperatives. And it's pretty easy. Just invite, look them up, reach out to their office. And I've found most representatives are pretty excited about going to meet with their constituents. So if you want help with that, please feel free to email me again at policy@usworker.coop, and I'd be really happy to help you with that. Before I get into kind of talking about the fellowship, I just also wanted to briefly share a little bit about some other stuff that's going on. So many of you probably heard about the Work Act that passed just at the very end of last year. So this would be the third piece of legislation regarding worker co-ops that has passed since 2018. It's the Worker Ownership and Readiness and Knowledge Act. It was put forth by Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Moran from Kansas. And this is a really exciting bill because it actually commits dollars towards employee ownership. That means it's support for both worker cooperatives and also for employee stock ownership plans and employee ownership trusts, which are a little different than what we do. They're all about broad-based ownership. They just differ because not all ESOPs and EOTs are also governed by the workers. So, as the Worker Co-op Federation, we obviously are working in the interests of y'all and are always pushing kind of like the cooperative lens on all of this work. I shared in the chat a link with a little bit more information about it, but the Work Act appropriated $50 million towards worker ownership over the course of 5 years. So the Work Act has already gone into effect. The office is starting to get set up. That work will happen a lot in 2023 and 2024. And then grant money will be available in 2025 for education and outreach and technical assistance about worker ownership. That's a lot to take in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add in the chat. I'm really happy to kind of like go back to that or follow up with people after the webinar if you'd like. Ali also mentioned the Regional Innovation Act. That was, like I said, that bill was a really exciting piece, and we're going to be moving, now that we've passed it, we're going to be moving towards implementation. So what you'll see a lot from me this year is a lot of asks to provide comment on regulations. I'll be organizing some opportunities to get in front of some of our representatives to share a little bit more about the great work that y'all are doing. We will continue to push forward the legislation that's out there. Aaliyah mentioned the Employee Equity Investment Act. That's one bill. There are at least 2 or 3 others that are also moving forward at the federal level. I just got off the phone today with Representative Ro Khanna's house. Representative Khanna is from California, and we've been working with his office for the last few years on a National Worker Co-op Development Act bill that we're hoping to get additional money through the Small Business Administration to do education and outreach and technical assistance, as well as provide financing for worker co-ops. So many things happening. I could go on and on and on. That's just the stuff at the federal level. There's also several states that are pushing forward bills to create an office for employee ownership, including Washington, Pennsylvania. I think there's additional legislation in Colorado. They already have an office, but I think there's additional legislation there. Massachusetts, they're kind of like solidifying an advisory board for their office of employee ownership. So there is really, it's really exciting work that's happening all over the place. And I encourage you to get connected. So now for the main event of tonight, I'm very excited to be sharing the Worker Ownership State Advocacy Fellows. So, this is the second year of this program, and we invite worker owners to have space to just think about, like, what should the government be doing for us? So we've elected these representatives. What are they actually doing to serve the worker co-op community? We recognize that, worker owners have usually probably more than a 40-hour-a-week job. So how do we make space for that? So we created this fellowship so that we could stipend worker owners to participate, learn a little bit about doing advocacy and working with the government and working on a project that might help towards those ends. So what you're going to see for the rest of our time together is presentations from our fellows. I'm really excited because a lot of them are creating tools that can be used to go to your senator and say, like, hey, did you know about home care co-ops? Did you know like creating a statute in your state? So the projects cover a wide range of topics, and I'm really excited for them to share with you. So with that, I will hand it over to our first fellow of the night, who is Marcy Harper Lawyer from Turning Basin Labs. Marcy, you are up.
Hi, everybody. As she said, I'm Marcy Harper Lawyer of Turning Basin Labs, TBL for short. It's kind of long-winded, so I like to keep it, in little letters. So my project is really about just creating some marketing materials and like a 2-pager that kind of explains what a cooperative staffing agency is and some of the needs that we have, the current movement, how bills play into it, et cetera. So just to kind of keep things really clean and concise, I'll just break down like my presentation and like what we are, some of the challenges we have, why we do it, and how we do it. So simply put, a staffing co-op is a staffing agency that has a cooperative structure. Depending on your model, you can invite in-house employees, gig workers, temp workers, just anybody who comes through your door to join your cooperative. We opt to have usually employers and our workers that come through join our cooperative, so we can kind of, balance the scales and have, I guess, both views at the table. I was able to interview one other cooperative staffing agency. There's not a whole lot in our area. So snagged one, and I learned that we have 2 completely different models, but we have pretty much the same issues. One is the job market is super wonky right now, and staffing agencies of any type are kind of struggling, whether it be just trying to get employers on board or workers. It's been kind of odd, but both the employer is saying there's no workers are saying there's no jobs. So I'm trying to figure out how we can bridge that. And I think that our cooperative has been able to do that. And yes, the other agency was Allied Up. Thank you, Paola. So another issue that we were having is there's a lack of understanding between the employers that we bring to the table, internal things like board members, our team members. It's just been really hard for both of us to scale and kind of get a good footing because there's so much at stake, whether it be profit or impact. Those are kind of like bumping heads. So usually, companies internally, they're like, we want to make a big impact and income. So it's been hard to kind of fuse that cause together. Also, we are a pretty new concept. So people are like, where's the value? Like, it's a staffing agency. So how can you use that to add value to not only your cooperative, but the workspace? So we've gotten really creative with our model in order to do both, get some job placements, be a bridge between those 2 parties and kind of help folks. So 2 main areas that we've kind of like focused on is amplifying worker voice and creating the pathways to not just temp jobs, but what we would call a high road career. So I'll cover a little bit of the mechanism that we use, which is employer of record, in order to achieve that. And yeah, it's a little funny, it's a little technical, so I won't get too deep into it. But all in all, we believe in the proximate leadership. So giving that opportunity to workers in kind of, bringing them to the table, and also letting the employers sit at the table as well, so we can kind of stay ahead of the curve in order to understand what the industry needs. About that employer of record bit, all that really is just kind of our staffing agency's ability to onboard a worker at the W-2. And what we've done using that function is partner with training providers and also nonprofits, because they can't really run payroll independently with philanthropic dollars. So that's where we come in. And being that we're super DEIB, really on the cusp of trying to get people high road employment, they've really latched on us. So we've kind of found a niche in that. And that really speaks to AB 2849, which is kind of pushing and really bringing to the forefront high road employment, as well as SB 1407. I really think that that bill can help small startups like ours kind of get the resources and development that we need, because at this point, we're so focused on the impact that a lot of times profit and income and extending those resources out to folks, whether it be our co-op members or the workers that we help, has been really, really difficult. So although we face a lot of challenges, I think the bills and the things that we're doing right now can really push it in a great direction. But it's really just all about people understanding that we exist. So that's it in a nutshell. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and thank you for the opportunity. I learned so much, and I'm hoping to bring all the knowledge that I have now into our model so we can make better impact.
Thank you so much, Marcy. One piece of kind of the fellowship pie is being able to articulate, like, what are the challenge, like what is my co-op, and like what are the challenges that we're running into. And I just want to shout out Marcy, and you'll see through the rest of the presentation, the folks are exercising that muscle of talking about, like, what is that we do, how do we talk about this, and how do we do it succinctly in a quick way that helps people really get on board with what we're looking for. So shout out to Marcy, who volunteered to go first. Very brave, and I love it. So we're gonna go over to Hannah Breckbill from Iowa. Hannah, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm Hannah. I work with Humble Hands Harvest, which is in the northeast corner of Iowa. We grow vegetables, organic vegetables, and pastured meat for direct market sale at farmers market. So we're a food farm in Iowa, which is a landscape that's technically not usually dominated. That's dominated by corn and beans, not food. So we're a little bit unique in that way. Right now we have 2 worker owners, and we have 2 employees who are in process of onboarding into ownership. So ultimately, probably in the next couple of years, we'll have 4 worker owners of our small farm. And my project as part of this fellowship was to just figure out who are the other worker-owned co-op farms in my region, ideally. And the answer is there aren't very many, and a lot of us are kind of making it up as we go along. And so I was able to connect with a researcher who has made a map of different worker co-op farms across the US. So there's that amount of information out there about who we all are. Yeah, one of my big questions still remains, like, what is it that causes a farm, or what are the motivations for a farm to become a worker-owned co-op? because it's a pretty different thing than that like typical family farm, which yeah, there's this kind of dynasty farming thing that happens, at least in the Midwest, where original homesteaders can kind of continue to pass their land down to their heirs, and their heirs may or may not farm it, and instead might rent it out to tenant farmers. So it's a kind of economic system that doesn't have the worker-owned co-op model is pretty counter to it. So one of the things that I kind of realize is one of the big benefits of a worker-owned co-op, or a reason that a lot of people do it, is because of needing land access and needing a way to kind of accumulate enough capital to be able to access land, which is a really capital intensive thing, and to be able to do the work of farming it. But then an added benefit of creating a good worker-owned co-op with like good bylaws, or like rules in place for how we hold capital and how we hold land together, means that there's a kind of built-in transition plan of like how workers get bought out, how new workers can buy in, which is something that's really lacking in the farming world. So many farms happen and then the owner dies, and then there's this like huge piece of capital that needs to be dealt with, and it doesn't always work well for the local food economy or for the farming, the local community, and instead kind of this money goes elsewhere. And so, yeah, that's a lot of what I've been thinking about. And I ended up writing an op-ed that is not quite published yet, but I'll put it out there once it is. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Hannah was, we had some kind of like target states that we were looking at. Hannah is from Iowa, and that was not one of our target states, but our kind of like during the application process we met, and I was just really interested in Hannah's perspective and like kind of looking at this kind of like growing scene of worker co-ops in Iowa. So I did want to just highlight that, like, the starting from a place where you're like really in the beginning and like trying to understand like how can co-ops grow in your area is really important. So like huge props to Hannah for kind of like working with us to kind of figure out what does our organizing look like in a state where there isn't a ton of organizing going on right now. So and I think particularly some of the land issues that Hannah mentioned are ones that we're starting to look at a little more, because we're seeing that in a lot of different areas, including what Hannah's brought up through the course of her project. So cool. Thank you so much, Hannah. And we are going to go to Delia next. And Delia has some slides I will pull up. Oh. Delia, are you there?
Sí, estoy aquí ya. Hola, muy buenas noches a todas. Sí, soy lista. Muchísimas gracias a todos y todas.
Thank you so much, everyone. I feel so honored to be in this space and thankful that I'm able to speak in my mother tongue. So thank you so much. And the purpose of my work is really to hear the voices of workers who are working in co-ops currently in North Carolina. I'm not a co-op developer, I'm not an expert. I don't have any trainings, but really just hearing from the voices of people who I interviewed, and we also did a survey, and also coming from my personal experience. I'm a worker owner, or I'm an owner of a farm here in Henderson County, North Carolina. And from my perspective as an immigrant and talking about advocacy, it's complex. There's so much disconnection amongst my community, and it's complicated sometimes to think that we can make or create any changes. And being part of these spaces is important because, oh, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me okay? Yes, okay, thank you. Yeah, and from my perspective or being an immigrant, it's hard to connect, but this exercise allowed me to be able to connect and hear directly from cooperative workers, folks who are worker owners, and something that is exciting. And the Federation only has 17 cooperatives, or only like registers 17 cooperatives here in North Carolina. We're getting there. We're in the early stages, and we have the understanding of what a co-op is, but a lot of times people think it's people working together and having a cooperative. But we know that there are the co-op principles, and there's a specific way that we can do cooperative work. And there are farm worker co-ops and worker co-ops that produce various different things. And currently, we are people who are working within the fields, and there's a lot of lack of access to resources that adapt to the reality of being an immigrant. Training services that are available are directed towards small business owners, but not cooperatives. And we know that having a cooperative is running a business, but also creating a network of people. And we can go into the next slide. And how I was sharing, we want to really lift up these voices, voices of not just immigrants, but people who are in rural or semi-rural areas. And we can go to the next slide. And so some of the first things that I asked was, what are the values? What are the main values? And some things that came out was building power, generating decent jobs and fair wages. So things that we want to accomplish, but also things that we need to do. The other things that came up was sharing responsibilities, achievements and risks, promoting entrepreneurship, creating a sense of community, flexibility, and social justice. And then also, because we interviewed immigrants, we wanted to, some of the values that came up was safe workplaces and investment for immigrant communities. We can go into the next slide. And some of the other things that we also identified were the challenges of worker-owned co-ops. One was lack of knowledge about the cooperative sector. What does it mean to be an owner? What does it mean to be part of a cooperative? And this also came up when finding new members, that people are interested, but there is a lack of trust to take that step and become a member of a worker-owned co-op. And a lot of us have so many roles. So work-life balance came up as a challenge. Access to capital was a big challenge, specifically for immigrant communities who don't have access to credit. Difficulty in developing skills and team capacity. So also talking about what it takes to work under this model. Also systems for decision making and creating those. Also, there's different cultures, different ways of communicating. Those are challenges. Also, bringing people in around social justice. How can we create the balance of who have between communities who have disparities and different documentation statuses, education levels, and also how to sustain and have permanence of members, sustain our members and the resources that we have. There was also negative prejudices that came up as challenges. So how do we, and just being scared of working together because of those prejudices. And for the people that I interviewed, when we're talking about the expectations or needs, we were talking about access to cooperative, financial, and business education. Also, language was a barrier, and we wanted to access grants. And a lot of times it's not possible because, oh, if it's a co-op, it's an entity that generates money, but that's not always the case. Tax incentives, the changing of laws, a lot of the times this allows people to access them, access to employment benefits, incentive to develop cooperatives, have them be developed as ecosystems. But for a lot of cooperatives, such as my cooperative, being in a rural area or a semi-urban area is a limitation. Greater collaboration between cooperatives, greater recognition of support at local and regional level, and sustained support from developers and mentors. Having support in the beginning and also during the process, because a lot of times it's isolating. And this exercise makes me think about how it's important and our cooperatives create the space to share and think about the difficulties that we face. And this should happen on a state level because we really depend on a lot of the decisions that happen on a state level. And we hope that these opportunities happen so that we can connect with other cooperatives in the area. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Hi, this is Mo again. Thank you so much, Delia, for sharing. Delia's work, I think, is so important because as I said before previously, we've been really responsive to legislators that come and ask us questions. And we've been sort of in this tune of going from responding, convening, and then organizing in response to whatever is being asked of us. And I think what Delia has done through her surveying of co-ops is really important because we can start from a place of understanding what are the challenges, especially for a lot of the Spanish-speaking co-ops that Delia talked to, and understanding the challenges first, and then being able to advocate from there. Which is really where we should be working at the pace of our movement and understanding what we need first, and then going to people and doing the advocacy that we want to do. So I just wanted to give Delia a little shout out there. And next up we have Victoria. Let me see. Mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Russell. I'm a worker owner of A Touch of TLC Home Healthcare Services over here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are 4 Black women-owned worker co-op. We are based out of Cincinnati and out of Co-op Cincy, which is been a great mentor to us. But I had decided to do my project on the basis of when you have different pay rates for caregivers. It basically starts as like you have to do certifications for the insurance company, so basically Medicaid, and versus private pay. And actually, I learned a lot during this time. I interviewed like 3 co-ops and 2 developers. So the strange thing is that a lot of them were not certified in taking public pay clients. And it kind of shifted my project because finding someone that was using, having the certifications and paying caregivers versus all of the guidelines that have stopped these other co-ops from being able to serve the public pay clients. During that time of speaking with them, it was very discouraging because like some of the guidelines was as deep as they had to be in business for 3 years. They had to have an office in that location. They had to pay to have their billing done. They couldn't do billing on their own. And it just really discouraged me, like I said, because, starting a worker co-op, you're starting it for the public. So it just was very discouraging. And then also it just became more of not even about compensation, but about certification. But as far as the compensation in it, the average is like the lowest I've seen was like $17.60, and the highest was like $19.48. And most of the people that I did interview said, and I feel the same way, it should be at least $25 to $30 an hour. When you are working with public pay, those are the people that really need the help more because they are income based mostly. So that really discouraged me from hearing that. But basically, a lot of them coming from, the standpoint of they are working towards to get the certifications, even though they've set higher guidelines in their areas, and things keep changing. Some of them even had to have a waiting list to be put on before they could even submit a certification. So like I said, I learned a whole lot, like I told Mo earlier today, just basically, interviewing each one and finding out the differences, and that I'm glad to hear that they're not discouraged from not being able to serve the public. But it did open my eyes to a lot of things. And I think going forward, I do still want to advocate more, finding out more about this, about why each state has these different guidelines and excruciating guidelines, especially because as a caregiver, you want to help everyone. So, it's not about money. So that's basically what I found out. But I really appreciate this fellowship. I've gained some great people to use as resources. And if I can help anyone ever, I'm here. And I appreciate you guys, Mo. And just want to give a shout out to Co-op Cincy. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And Victoria, like many other of our fellows, as we got into the projects, like really had to be able to pivot really quickly and evolve their project, which I really appreciated. That's not always an easy thing. And I think a lot of the fellows had to do that this year. And I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness and the grace, especially Victoria and of all of our fellows, that for being open to that and being able to really understand kind of like what the issues are, because great advocacy really only comes from a really strong understanding of what the problems are. So I just feel really grateful for being able to have watched Victoria, especially go through this process, and learn a lot through it, and I learn a lot through it as well, because it's not just advocacy about worker co-ops, it's advocacy for whatever worker co-ops are doing. In this case, working in the medical field, really understanding that stuff, which is just very difficult to understand, and very much a black box for a lot of people. So very huge appreciations to Victoria, and we'll continue the home care train by going to Terrell and Yvette from Home Care Associates here in Philadelphia, where I currently am. And so we'll switch over to them who share. Let's see, Terrell. Okay. Go for it.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This evening here in Philadelphia. I'm Terrell Cannon from Home Care Associates, Home Care Co-op in Philadelphia. Now let Yvette introduce herself.
Hello. I'm Yvette from Home Care Associates of Philadelphia. It's night, it's chilly, and we're ready to do this.
So our project, we chose to find out from co-ops, particularly home care co-ops, the challenges with accessing those SBA loans with the personal guarantee, because we are pushing the initiative and the bill to kind of get that removed, because for home care co-ops, we're stuck with the reimbursement rates that we have here in Philadelphia. You're not able to access dollars, or loans in that case, to help build our workers' skills or capacity. So what we've done is we chose to interview home care worker-owned co-ops to see what their challenges were, what loops did they have to jump through to even get to the office, so to speak, or to get into the door to be able to talk about their co-op and getting SBA loans. We realized in doing that we didn't get a lot of feedback from it, but we realized in doing that, because this initiative is so cut close to the bottom line for a lot of home care co-ops, businesses have to still run. And in our co-op, we realized that, okay, we're not able to access these loans. We're still researching to get, the challenges. So when we are sitting at the table, we're able to say, hey, these are the challenges, or, even if they decide to, even if there's a possibility for us to get the loan, we feel as though we should not just get that 70% of it, but to get the 100% as everybody else does. Because even with the limitations that they have with us there, we're still not able to access those funds fully. And for worker home care co-ops, for our worker owners, those are the ones that need the dollars we're looking for is to build them. And we're trying to get the SBA offices to see that with those limitations, it limits the workers' ability to have sustainability in their own lives, because in our organizations as co-ops, everything we do is for the workers. So we shifted a little as well and decided, because we will be present at the US Federation of Workers Conference, we're going to talk with more co-ops and that will take us some outside of the home care sector to kind of see if those challenges are the same, are they different for a home care co-op versus a non-home care co-op, to access those limitations the same. So we're there next week. So we'll be continuing our project. But in the meantime, we had some leeway, and Yvette was able to speak to Senator Casey about, her story, and hoping that we can push the funds that's needed for co-ops so that we can continue to build our community of workers that are able to own their work, be able to have a stake at the table and and thrive as they aspire to thrive in the profession that they chose.
Yes, we showed up there. And first of all, I want to thank everybody, because when I talked to Senator Casey and Joseph and Amy, a couple of people, you know, they was asking us, you know, how we're surviving as a co-op. And I was saying that we're surviving because some of our workers are basically just working for nothing. And, you know, there is so much funding that we need to survive for the future. And so a question they was asking me too was, so what do you think should be done? I said, whenever funding come in for SOB or anybody else, that we should get it too. You know, it shouldn't be based on a first come service. Should be as soon as come there, basically make sure everybody get equal shares of it. And also I was basically telling Senator Casey and them, I said, you know, I work every day, and for me to step out this door knowing that I'm not making that much, but I have to work to feed my family. And so, you know, that this is the reason why I'm on the board and on the policy actually to push this, because when one day that I retire, I want these companies to still survive into the future. We cannot survive if we don't have the funding that we needed. And so it was, you know, it was so amazing that they was listening. And so I got a couple of calls later on and say, we would love for you to hear your story. So we was talking about the conference. So I was like, well, that's good. And well, anyway, it happened, but it didn't happen. But right now I'm working on a letter for Senator Casey and his group. They want me to write a letter about my story and how I survived during, you know, the COVID. And I told him, I said, well, before the COVID came, we was in a pandemic anyway, because of lack of funding for certain, you know, for the co-ops and stuff like that. So he said, well, what do you mean? I said, you know, before COVID, it was a pandemic already. You know, lack of funds, people losing jobs, people who don't want to work, people who taking care of their loved one without the professional skills that they need. You know, we're basically trying to train people who taking care of their loved ones. And he was like, okay, they was like, that's amazing. So right now I'm working on the story to pass on to them, and it have to be in by the 6th. So wish me luck, everybody. Wish me luck. And I'm going to continue fighting for everybody, because I was listening to some of your stories. I say, wow, you know, sometimes when you think that you have less people, hearing people working with 4 people, um, people was talking about their crops and everything. You know, this is the issue that I'm going to push for too. It's not all about nursing. It's period that everybody just trying to survive in small businesses, and we can't get this. And like Terrell said, when we invite people to be co-ops and tell them about co-ops, so this is what the response that we get. Excuse me. Sorry. So hopefully that this letter, they look for it. And I was also invited whenever they come to Philadelphia, Washington, they want me to come and speak.
Yes, so we're going to actually broaden our project to get the challenges overall, and then compare that to, I mean, not compare it, but look side by side with that with home care co-ops to see what the difference is, because I know other co-ops are not bound by reimbursement rates and other limitations, but that in doing this research in it, it made me wonder, you know, what are the limitations for others? Why are they still only getting this 70%? So we'll be continuing to do that push until this bill is passed. The co-ops are able to access 100% of SBA loans without that personal guarantee. Because again, if you look at the workers, you talk to the workers, and you look at the organizations, you'll see that we are 100% guaranteed.
Definitely. And our
So
workers, yes.
So thank you, everyone, and Mo, again, for this opportunity and this platform to be able to, you know, push this and connect with lots of other people on the issues that, you know, affect our businesses, and the networking that also allows us to grow as together. Because again, we're in the home care sector, and you got the farm sector. We're all one, if you think about it, because our whole agenda, again, is to build the workers and ourselves.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you.
Thank you so much, Terrell and Yvette. It never ceases to amaze me how almost every time the fellows have met, I've been brought to tears by people's stories, because this work is really real, and this I think sometimes it can feel like advocacy work is very, I don't know, very clinical, very dry, very disconnected from work that people are doing on the front lines. And when we talk about making change, this is, these things can be very technical, but changing something like access to the SBA 7A loan program is a really huge deal. One of the bills that's actually up at the federal level right now is actually to remove that personal guarantee issue for specifically for cooperatives. And that only happens if people like Yvette and if people like Terrell are able to tell their stories. A huge heartfelt thank you to both of you for sharing, and just encouragement for all when you get those asks from me and other people from the Federation to sign on to a letter to tell the SBA that we need to get rid of the personal guarantee. Please think of Yvette and Terrell and Victoria and all these fellows, and know that it really does make a big difference, even just signing on to a letter. So as I gather myself back up, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew Gazenberg from New Frameworks up in Vermont. It's some states they're working on statutes, and in some states they've had one for a really long time. And I was really excited to work with Andrew on this particular project. So I'll hand it off to you now. You should be, maybe, are you getting the button to unmute? Still can't hear you.
Yeah, unmute. All right. Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, glad to be here with y'all. Yeah, so I work with New Frameworks Natural Design Build. We are structured as an LLC with bylaws to operate as a worker-owned co-op. And I've always kind of wondered about all these different models of how we incorporate it, and how we set ourselves up as cooperatives, and really was getting the impression that so many organizations are really set up as an LLC and aren't really using the worker co-op statutes that much. So that sort of drove me to look into why that is, and if there's things about those that we can improve. I was fortunate to get to connect with an incoming freshman legislator in Vermont, who is interested in putting a lot of his energy into work for co-ops, and he has already in his short time introduced a couple changes to the worker co-op statutes that are in process. One is a self-executing securities exemption, basically allowing worker-owned co-ops to be able to raise some equity without having to go through laborious processes filing with the SEC. Another was looking at this issue of the statutes here in Vermont specified that 50% plus one of the workers have to be owners in a worker cooperative corporation. And for New Frameworks, while we are an LLC, that would be a big issue, where there's periods where we've had to grow very fast, or wanted to grow very fast. A couple of years ago, we incubated a whole new line of business, hired on people, built that up. And our new workers have a 5-year trial period before they can buy in as full members. So there's no way we would have been able to stay over this 50 plus 1% in that period. So we looked at some examples. California has an option where it's 50+1, have to be on track to become full members. Massachusetts has just completely removed that as a qualification. And what the legislator here has introduced is following the Massachusetts example, thinking that there aren't, if people are going to take advantage of that and try to be more exclusive about ownership, they would just choose a different model. And so thinking that there's probably not a lot of risk in just removing that totally. I did, however, recognizing that one of the decision points of how do we incorporate is often about employment status, and if folks can't legally be employees, often choose an LLC model instead of a worker co-op corporation. And so that was really kind of just like eating at me, that just focusing on the worker co-op corporation was really excluding a large portion of our cooperative community. So I wanted to start looking at, all right, what are potential ways to improve an LLC, or some issues that we're facing. And one of the things that I know New Frameworks feels is it's very hard to set up. There are ways around it, I found, but hard to set up a way for the company itself to retain money that's not allocated to members. And we're really interested in seeing our company be passed down through generations and be part of this community, and so having kind of a collective fund that is dedicated for that. And also, if the company was ever to liquidate or anything, having something that wouldn't get sold off and would be redistributed back into the cooperative movement is something we would really love to have. So I started looking at some models, and honestly started playing around with the idea of, well, maybe there could be a second type of worker co-op corporation in Vermont, so people can choose to opt into this or not. That does allow for something. Sorry, let me backtrack a second. The ways around this that I found with the LLC end up having a lot of tax disadvantages. And so looking at, all right, if we're setting it up where we're saying, hey, if this company gets sold off, these funds are being like given, basically put into this cooperative development fund, as well as potentially taking some of an example from the Italian legislation where 3% of a cooperative surplus every year has to go to a cooperative development fund. That seemed like a good argument to me for, hey, we're creating a really collective benefit here. There should be some tax advantages to opting into something like that. I also wanted to look into, is there ways that the worker cooperative corporation can be more inclusive, and folks that can't legally be considered employees can be part of that. And while, disclaimer, very much not a labor lawyer or any type of lawyer, I looked at some different cases where people were challenging whether this one company or another, the workers there were considered employees. And unfortunately, in a lot of jurisdictions, it looks like different sets of criteria were applied to come to that conclusion. The more I looked into it, there were a lot of principles that really came down to a lot of this. Is there a master servant relationship, and how much control over the work do the workers have? And a lot of things that really, to me, felt like it actually did align very well with cooperative values. And so looking at it from that lens, I've kind of been inspired to look at basically starting to draw up a template of governance and management model that really works with a lot of those trials that have been shown to say, oh no, these workers were not considered employees, and fit cooperative values in a way that there can be basically a governance and management template to apply that can make that a safer bet.
True. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. We do have to move on. So do you think you
Great.
can just
That's a perfect time to wrap up, I think.
cool, thanks. Cool. One thing that I love about this fellowship is that it goes everything from you know, just kind of like how do we understand our issues to like really, really nerdy advocacy things, and Andrew's enthusiasm for getting into like the nitty-gritty details of the statute in Vermont, I think is just really impressive. So I think especially I think like Andrew doesn't have a really deep advocacy background. So I just want to share that as like kind of an encouragement to folks who think like, oh, this advocacy work or working with the government seems really hard. You know, I think Andrew's just simple enthusiasm towards the work has really gone really far. So I just wanted to add a little encouragement for everyone and some props to Andrew for getting super nerdy here. So I know we're starting to run up against time, so I do want to encourage the rest of the fellows to try to keep it right on time. And with apologies, I know some people might have to drop off, but we might just go like a few minutes over. But with that, so I will move us on over to Andrea.
Yes, good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here where I'm in Seattle, Washington. Andrea Williams Muhammad, pronouns she, her. I am actually the director of Enzori Malkia Birth Cooperative. I'm a doula, have been a doula for over 30 years now. One of the main areas of my work now is in policy. And I serve as a program coordinator for a doula program. And right now in the state of Washington, as well as in other states across the country, doula services are now going to be covered by Medicaid. So doulas will be able to directly bill for Medicaid. What that does for us is open up potential. But what it also does is create the potential for the lack of access and the lack of infrastructure for many doulas working across the country to be able to access the capacity as well as capital to build up infrastructure to be able to handle that process. So what I'm proposing and have been working on is how to incorporate the worker cooperative model into current doula staffing agencies or current doula programs, and what that would look like for doulas. One of the problems that in my community as a doula that we have is that many of us have LLCs or are sole proprietors which kind of limits our overhead. But at the same time also limits our ability to service certain clients, such as private pay clients, what we call private pay, which would be insurance clients, and now with Medicaid clients potentially. So in doing that, I've reached out and have started a group here in Seattle of doulas who are actively working together to create this new worker cooperative, which would also address some issues that we have with providing wraparound services, such as lactation consultants, midwives, yoga instructors and holistic providers that are actually certified and registered here in the state of Washington. It has been interesting, this whole journey with the fellowship. Several times I've shifted and changed, but Mo, but Mo and a couple of local people here have helped me to drill down on what really needs to happen first. The legislative piece, I actually dabbled in with a group here called Doulas for All, which is working with state legislators to draft the policy and for the current Medicaid reimbursement package that Washington passed last year. But all in all, this experience has been a positive one. It has opened a lot of doors for me potentially within my own agency, as well as several other doulas that are part of our new collective here. And we're also, I'm originally not from the state of Washington, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. And just last week, reconnected with a couple of doulas there who are also working with, I believe the organization is called Bread in Baltimore. And some other folks who are members of another cooperative in Baltimore, Red Emma's bookstore. So it was interesting, and I'm glad I was offered this opportunity and to meet some very wonderful people. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. For those of you who are interested, Bread is the Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy in Baltimore, and they do amazing work. You should absolutely look them up. And I do want to throw up some flowers for Andrea. Like they said, she said she had to kind of change course a few times and evolve a lot over the course of the fellowship. And I just really appreciated her thoughtfulness there. You know, and I think is a really good illustration of how worker co-ops can and should be working in tandem with other movements. So Andrea mentioned Doulas for All, and you know, there are a lot of you know, issue specific movement groups that we should be working with, so that worker co-ops can be a tool in the tool belt of other social movements to achieve economic justice and racial justice. So a huge shout out for that work. And let's pull up Mabry is up next. Mabry is one of our amazing board directors for the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And I was super excited to work with him in another capacity. So Mabry, over to you.
All right, so I don't know if I can, man, this has been a great call. And actually where I want to start is, you know, shout out to Bread and the work they do, because it's the same work that I do here as the Director of Lending with New Economy Works West Virginia. A lot of the challenges that the worker owners have been talking about on this call is something that our organization as a whole, we're the Seed Commons, right? But individually, we work in our local communities to like really walk with the side by side with the worker owners, with the, you know, all the way through development, including access to capital, right? So we really try to bridge that thing. And I'm also a worker owner with the consulting group, the Ajani Group, who also basically technically provides technical assistance, education, support, and things like that. So I promise you that leads to the fellowship, a piece of legislation, right? So for me, it's like the idea of cooperatives are not mainstream, especially like in my area. right? We actually have a cooperative association law under Chapter 19 for agriculture, but we were looking to do something to put cooperatives, just the idea of registering your business as a worker cooperative in the forefront under West Virginia Code Chapter 31, West Virginia Business Corporation Act, which is where you know you would find like LLCs or other types of corporations, like more mainstream. But also too, there's something there down the line by I think by doing this allows us to start to access some of that other capital Mo and others have been talking about, to go ahead and beef this piece of legislation once it's established, worker co-ops in there, later down the line, we can start to beef this legislation up to have more funding in there for developers like ourselves, New West Virginia, because the thing is, while, Brad, New West Virginia, while we help worker owners, right, our capacity is also limited because we can only, because we go so deep, we can only work with so many worker owners at a time or so many co-ops at a time. And so, legislation is a way to bring other dollars in to the community, to use government dollars to so that we can access it for training and TA, and it takes like policy and stuff like this, so that, down the line we can have more people that are out there, just like as you guys have been saying on the call, like we need the developers to be able to work with us ongoing and continue on, because like this business stuff is hard, and we need support along the way. So this fellowship has been really great in the sense that like I said, as a developer myself, got to hear a lot of the stories and really hear from worker owners and people that are operating co-op that we're looking to build this here, to hear like what they're going through, and to understand like what we need to do, those that are charged with providing access to capital or helping people access capital. We really don't know how to support you unless we hear from you. So like this fellowship was a way to really like just get in there and not be so close to it, because when I'm working with folks here, there's it's a little bit more urgency, but in this I got to sit back and kind of see what the issues are, and to be able to take that back into the work that we do. So and then working with Mo and the Federation, like it's just been great just seeing having access to all this already done work on legislation, so you didn't really have to start from scratch. So like this was really great just to see all of the work that people have been doing, and that like we should just keep fighting for it. There was no cooperative corporation statute in mind in West Virginia until somebody thought about it and was able to like just put it on a legislator's mind, and all of a sudden it was there. So like if we keep fighting for what we believe in and advocate for it, like people will pick it up, because we can show them better than we can tell them. That's all I would say. Did I 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Right on time. Amazing. Yeah, I mean, Mabry and I just had the opportunity to see each other here in Philadelphia for our board retreat, and I think the enthusiasm that Mabry brings to the work is amazing. And exactly, nothing happens unless somebody takes the first step. And I do really want to spotlight Mabry for being one of the people that took that first step in West Virginia, because it's not always the easiest thing to do, to get the balls rolling. So appreciate you so much. And we're down to our last fellow of the night, Ashton Ham. I'm really excited for y'all to hear from her, and then I'll close up and we'll get everyone out of here and try to respect everyone's time as much as possible. So yeah, with that, I will hand over to you, Ashton.
Thank you. And I guess I just want to say, like, I'm so honored to be with the rest of this cohort. It's like all of these fellowship projects are so amazing. So thank you all for being so inspiring. So yeah, I'm Ashton Ham with UXO Architects. We're organized as cooperatively as we can be within the state of California. We work on projects from single family all the way to working with other cooperatives, nonprofits, community land trusts, and most notably and recently a tribal-led nonprofit. So through the process of us kind of trying to become a cooperative in the state of California, we learned that professionals aren't actually allowed to use the state cooperative corporation statute in California. Professionals are limited to certain entity types, like architects and lawyers can't even use the LLC entity type in California. And generally, we understand the cooperative corporation statute to be quite beneficial in the way that it combines the taxation benefits of both the S and the C corporation. So using subchapter T of the National Tax Code. I guess, it kind of related to Andrew's point, I kind of zoomed in on the technical here. And so the kind of purpose of what I'm trying to do is really to help professionals use the cooperative statute. It might not be, the greatest cooperative statute of all, but I think I want to open the door to more cooperatives and professionals to use this. So, again, as I'm saying, it's architects, lawyers, doctors, so on and so forth. Through this fellowship, I've actually been able to have some really great conversations. I've talked to a group of therapists who wanted to have a cooperative, and some lawyers that are also interested in that model. And I think I've learned the extent that folks are willing to go through to kind of achieve these workaround models to consider themselves cooperatives. There's some really creative permutations. And so, yeah, I mean, essentially the opportunity would be to change the legislation in California, specifically the Business and Professions Code, to allow professionals to use the state statute. The scope of this fellowship is really just going to be a 1 to 2 page document that is essentially, to be put in front of state legislators. I've actually had a few conversations with, I spoke with someone with revenue and tax today, and later this week I'm speaking to someone in the business and professions world. But essentially to get this document in front of folks, because many people don't even know that this is an issue. And then hopefully we can move forward from there to eventually change legislation to allow more professionals in. And I think the idea is just proliferate more co-ops, which will just kind of keep propagating. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashton. Again, with the kind of like really, really detailed view of, sometimes when you're creating a statute, it's not always obvious what could happen, right? And the things that might come up over the course of businesses being developed, I think it's even only, really been in the last like 5 to 10 years that worker co-ops have been doing a lot of incorporating as LLCs for a great many reasons. And I think what Ashton is pointing to and their project is really important, just to make sure that all worker co-ops are able to participate in all the work that we're advocating for. So as we try to get money for worker co-ops, to get support for them, you know, like, let's actually make sure that all co-ops can actually access all of those great benefits. And I know Ashton has done a ton of work to reach out to all the relevant people and to unearth the systems in California on who to talk to and where and why. And that, I will say, is a very difficult thing to do. So so shout out to Ashton for doing that. And I promised I'd get you all out of here as as close to on time as we can. So I'm gonna just do an overall shout out for all of the fellows. This has been honestly an honor for me to be able to work so closely with members. It's my favorite thing that I do, because I do get to work so closely with worker owners. And I really treasure that time, being able to hear directly from people about the challenges they're facing and their perspectives on how we should be getting worker owners more and more engaged in the advocacy work that we're doing. So huge shout out to them. I encourage people to shout out in the chat any other appreciations you want to share, and to get involved. So next Thursday we're going to be having a policy and advocacy call for our membership. We're actually going to be digging deeper into some of the state initiatives that are happening, and some of the states that I mentioned previously. We have a startup, actually, you know what, I think actually since I wrote this, the startup webinar actually happened today. And there'll be another one next month. But I do encourage people to join the email list that is in the chat. So you will see in somewhere in the chat, I added a link to the policy and advocacy membership list. You might have to scroll up a little bit, but thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us tonight. It really means a lot to me, and I know to the fellows, to have y'all here to listen to hear about their projects. And I encourage every single one of you, whether it's the Federation or otherwise, to get involved, vote, advocate for the issues that you really care about, and make sure to stay tuned from the Federation, because we'll do another one of these worker co-op policy pulses a little bit later this year. So thanks again, everyone. If you attended, you will also receive the recording. Thanks so much, and have a great night.